Hi, I'm Rebecca and I am the Psych Coach. Welcome to my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about a topic that I'm sure at some point some of you have questioned. Can exes be friends? It's a pretty loaded topic and I think most people have an opinion on it, whether they're professional or whether they're just in your friendship group. People tend to feel really strongly about it and often they're led by their own experience. I'm sure those of you watching today will be able to refer back to a time in your life where if you've been in a relationship, you can remember thinking, I really want to have them as a friend in my life. I don't want them as a partner, but I really want to have them as a friend. Or maybe you've been on the receiving end of someone saying that and they've wanted you as a friend and maybe you've not been so keen. But it's often a fallout of breakups where there is a question mark, particularly if it's been an amicable breakup, about can we be friends? And I think there are a few things that need to be taken into account when you're thinking about that. One of the points to take into account is typically the desire to be friends is most strong in the initial days of a breakup. That's because the idea of losing that person who you have spent so much time with, who knows you so well, who's been such a part of your life, maybe your family's life for so long, it feels terrible to lose them. And having them in a friendship capacity is definitely better than losing them. But what typically happens is as heartbreak heals or as people learn to live their separate lives away from each other, they can end up not feeling the need for a friendship. Other times, and maybe this is something you've experienced, there's a desire to maintain a friendship because a friendship with that person feels better than nothing. If that's you, it really is best to leave yourself time before you start pursuing a friendship with that person. Not least because it can be incredibly painful to watch the person who you really care about and probably still want a relationship with, but are actually just going to sort of settle for a friendship with, potentially going on to date someone new. How supportive can you be as a friend if the person you ultimately want to be in a relationship with is talking to you about their dating? It's painful. So if you're finding yourself wanting to have a friendship with an ex, I really urge you to think about why. Is it because actually deep down you really want them back as a partner? Is it deep down because life feels better having something of them in it, with them in it, than nothing at all? Then maybe they're not the best reasons to be trying to be friends with your ex. Potentially though, you may have an ex who has helped you through an incredibly difficult time in your life. Maybe you've got an ex who you ended with because there was such an amazing friendship there, but there was no romantic connection. And often, if that is the case, people will talk about a desire to have a friendship with their ex that is perhaps a healthier one than simply wanting their ex back or wanting them back because having them back is better than having no contact at all. So there are valid reasons for wanting to be friends with your ex, but there are definitely some things that need to be taken into account if you're thinking about having a friendship with an ex. The biggest thing you need to take into account, and that would be my point number one, is you need to have a significant period of time apart before you look at having a friendship. Even if your relationship ended and you were really good friends and maybe you hadn't been intimate for a long time and I don't know, maybe there was no romance there anyway, you were still operating under the umbrella of a partnership, of a relationship. And because of that, you can't just transition from one day being romantic partners to the second day being friendship partners. It doesn't work like that. So you need to have a natural break. And I'm sure lots of you will think, well, how long is that break? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it 6 months? Look, it is totally dependent on the relationship. Often it's dependent on the length of the relationship as well. But there has to be a period of separation. Ideally, no contact. Now, maybe that's a bit unrealistic, but there's got to be a distinction between the contact you are having in your relationship and the contact you're now having as friends. 5 considerations to having a friendship with an ex would be as follows. Point number 1 that you need to consider is having some time apart from them. You can't go from being in a relationship with someone one day to having a friendship the following day. It just doesn't work like that. Even if You're thinking, yes, but we were friends anyway. We hadn't had, an intimate relationship for a long time. We were only ever like flatmates in the end. It still doesn't matter. You were still operating under a relationship in which you were both partners to one another. And therefore, you can't just transition straight away into a friendship. There has to be a period of separation. Ideally, a clean break from each other for a period of time. That might be really difficult if you've had lots of contact, if you've always spoken to each other every hour of the day, but there is a benefit in totally breaking away from that person for a period of time. And I'm sure you're wondering, well, how long is that period of time? But that's a case of how long's a piece of string. There are so many factors that decide that. If you've been together with someone for years and years, then chances are you will probably need a bigger times apart from each other than someone who's been together perhaps less time. That having been said, if you've had a really intense short relationship, you may need as long as someone who's come out of a relationship after years and years. But there does need to be a distinction between romance and friendship, and that distinction has to come with a period of separation and ideally no contact. Consideration number 2 is if you've got to the point where you are being friends with your ex, there must be no secrecy. By that, I mean if either of you have moved on, if either of you are seeing new people, then there mustn't be secrecy with the new partners. You've got to be open about it. A happy relationship, a happy friendship isn't shrouded in secrecy. If you're not doing anything wrong, then you're going to need to be open with your current partners about it. And that might be a really tough gig, and maybe you'll have partners who aren't keen on it. But that's something you've got to do because you can't operate a secret friendship. Consideration number 3 is being really certain that neither of you wants something else from the friendship. I know you can't take responsibility for someone else, and I know you can't get into their head and work out what it is they truly want. But you've got to know that if you're going into that relationship, that the only thing you want from that relationship is a friendship. Nothing else. Really dig deep to think about if there's a motivation for you to somehow rekindle something that was once there. If that is the case, you really need to pull back. That's not how you should be entering the friendship, okay? If you get the slightest whiff that the person, that your ex actually wants something more, maybe there are overly friendly text messages, maybe there's an overly familiar touch that comes when you meet up, maybe there's just a degree of intensity about the encounters that just don't feel like other friendships, then you need to question that. Because for as long as people are in that as long as you're in that friendship with at least one of you wanting more, it's not a healthy one and it's not a proper friendship. Consideration number 4. If you do have a relationship with your ex, there need to be some rules. The obvious ones go without saying, that no, you don't have sex, that you don't blur the boundaries and every so often end up kissing. That's obvious. But what you also need to have rules about is the ground you will cover when you're with each other. Ideally, this stuff needs to be explicit. If you've got a friendship with an ex, the idea is you don't spend time reminiscing about what it was like when you were together. You don't recount stories to other people of what it was like when you were doing your fun things as a couple and what you got up to in your private lives. That stuff is in the past. That stuff needs to be left behind. And whilst, of course, a lot of that forms your friendship now, it doesn't need to be mentioned, because what can happen is if you keep going back to the past and reminiscing about the good times and thinking about, how wonderful your relationship was or the funny bits of it, it can make you forget what you're dealing with now, which is a friendship. And friendships don't have a romantic base to them, and therefore you need to be boundaried about doing the romantic memory recall stuff, because it's not relevant in your current friendship, and it could take you back to a place where you are wanting more from your ex-partner. Consideration number 5 is review with yourself how you're feeling about it. Some people go for a really long time being friends with their ex and then sort of get to a point where they think, I don't think I'm getting what I want from this friendship anymore. Maybe I don't need them anymore. And that's okay if you outgrow that relationship. Or maybe you'll get to a point months, years down the line where you're thinking, being around them is fueling feelings of me still wanting to be with them. I think I want them back. And if that's the case, then of course you've got to review how possible it is for you to have a friendship with your ex. The reality is our feelings towards people change over time. I'm sure you've had friendships that you've outgrown. I'm sure you've had relationships that you've wanted to progress that perhaps you haven't once upon a time wanted to do. And that's the same if you've got a friendship with an ex. You need to review how you're feeling. Are you getting what you want from the relationship? Are your motives for the friendship still non-romantic? Then great, go for it. But if your feelings slightly change and you're finding yourself wanting more, you need to do something about it. And if the feelings aren't reciprocated, you need to probably pull back from that friendship. So thank you for listening to today. I'm Rebecca, the Psych Coach. Hit the like button if you like today's video, and please subscribe so I can keep on giving you tips and tricks to use psychology in your day-to-day life.